Good evening. Good to see you tonight. Hope everybody got to have a nap this afternoon. I didn't. Maybe somebody took one for me, so I'll absorb the rest from the rest of you. But it's good to be here tonight. So we're gonna go hard. We have 8 Sundays where we have meetings tonight, and I've got to get through 10 chapters. And I know my goal is to get through 1 tonight. So, and plus I have to do all the introductory materials. So we'll see if we can get through everything I want to get through tonight or not. But we're in the book of Esther, and it's for such a time as this, right? It's you want to know what the book of Esther is about. You'll kind of get the center of it. It's this verse in chapter 4, verse 14. Mordecai's talking to Esther as she's trying to convince her to go and meet before the king. And he says, and who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And, that's just, it's not explicit, but it's implicitly a trust in God that God has put you here for just this time. And that's what we want to see, that's the way God operates. He puts people in where he wants them, and he works the way he wants to work in history. And that's exciting. Esther. The events in Esther occur. We know this is pretty exact. We don't often know this for biblical books, but this is actually we're pretty sure it's 483 BC to 473 BC. During the first half of the reign of King Xerxes, which we're going to read in the book because it's written by a Hebrew. His name is Ahasuerus, but this is King Xerxes. In fact, the very first verse tells us exactly who he is, so we'll see that in just a minute. He ruled in total from 486 to 465. The name Ahasuerus is the Hebrew transliteration of the Persian name that. I'm not even going to try to say it, but that's basically the Hebrews trying to say what his Persian name was, while Xerxes is the name we're probably most familiar with. That's his Greek name, right? That's what the Greeks would have called him. This is a representation that's the extent of the Persian Empire. So he was ruling most of the known world at this time. So as you can see, all the way over, he's basically centered around what modern-day Iraq and Iran. And then as you can see, followed all the way down, you can see Jerusalem, even down into most of Egypt, and much of Greece, but not all of Greece. Which is not to say he didn't try. Xerxes tried a lot to conquer Greece, but he couldn't really get any further, right? There's I don't know if you know, there's a famous story of the Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. That's this Xerxes, right? This Xerxes is trying to conquer the Greek city-states, and so when you think of how history, the Battle of Thermopylae, that's this guy who is trying to conquer Greece. More specifically for us, to kind of place it where the events of Esther occurred during between the first return of the Jews after the 70-year captivity. So Nebuchadnezzar takes them to Babylon, and then under Zerubbabel, some of them go back, right? And then there's another return by Ezra. It's about 458, and then so the Esther is happening between those two events, the first return and the second return. That's when Esther is happening. So there's some Jews that have already went back. There's some Jews that are still in the Persian Empire at this point. And then later on, Nehemiah is after this, when he is sent back. So this is later, even further on after this, about 445 BC. You probably can't read that, but I have a young gentleman who's going to pass some papers out so you can actually see. I made 15, so if you're a couple, please share. So that way I have enough. I wasn't sure how many I'd need. It looks like I should have printed a few more. So, but if you look on here, you can, I'll give him a second because it is hard to see. I couldn't read that, and I have this in front of me, so I can put the slides. I haven't yet, but I'll put the slides on under the resource page for you. All right, so if everybody's got that in front of them now, you can see where his King Darius, right? That's Daniel. If you look at the very bottom, there's books, the lives, Haggai and Zechariah on the bottom left, and over on the right, you've got the lifespan of Ezra and Nehemiah. And then you've got Darius, then Xerxes, then Artaxerxes, who is Xerxes' son. All right, so you've got this reign from 486 to 465. Up top, there's the events of the book of Esther. Chapter 1, chapter 2, they're all very close together. And then Esther's chosen queen. There's actually, it seems like if you read Esther all the way through in one sitting, and you can do that with Esther. You can read it all through in one sitting very easily, probably 30 or 40 minutes, and you can read the whole book. But there's actually a good amount of time that passes, several years between some things that happens. And so we'll try to keep note of it. It says, and it came to pass, or in those days. That usually means that some time has passed, and so we'll get that. But that's I thought that was helpful, kind of helped me place everything in the proper. Esther has a very interesting distinctive. It is one of only 2 books where God is not mentioned specifically. Who wants some bonus points and tell me what the other book is? Not Ruth. Probably don't read this one a whole lot either. Song of Solomon actually does not mention God by name. So anyway, that's curious. But even further, there's no mention of the law of God, the Levitical system, any kind of sacrifices, worship, or even prayer. Now, when I first looked at that, I was like, what do you mean there's no prayer? And I had to go back and look through, and actually, they fast. It doesn't specifically say they're praying. It says they fast in preparation for when we get to the story where Esther is going in to see the king. So, key figures. Who do we need to know? We've already talked about the first one was Ahasuerus or Xerxes, who's king. Right? He's going to play very prominently. Very powerful man. He's ruling literally something like 90% of the known world. He's the ruler of. Second, we have his king. Her name is Vashti. She has a very minor part, and it's a short part. She's not around very long, and she only does one action. But it's very important in the scheme of things, and in terms of God's plan, little things can make a big difference. Third is a Benjamite named Mordecai, who is was taken over in the captivity, but he's now living in the capital. We know that he's basically probably descended from Saul. That's kind of, as you go through his lineage, he's a descendant of Saul, but he's in captivity. He's living in Susa, and his uncle has a daughter, right? Her name is Esther, or the Hebrew name is Hadassah. She is his uncle's daughter, but he is raising her as his, basically, if you get that, his uncle's daughter, so it's his cousin, but she's younger than him at some point, and so he is raising her in his household. And then finally, this bad guy named Haman, who is not a sympathetic figure at all, and you're going to be cheering for his demise. In fact, Jewish people continue to cheer for his demise at present day when they celebrate a feast that we're going to talk about here in just a second. Purpose and themes. What are we going to pull out of this overall from the book of Esther? I think, first of all, it's divine providence. Even though God is not mentioned specifically, he is literally on every page of this book. Everything that happens, you can just see that God is taking these sinful people and ensuring that his plan is going forward. And that ought to be of a great comfort to us. We're going to talk much more about that. Coupled with that is human responsibility. We get to see some very courageous acts by very flawed people. Esther and Mordecai, again, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, are not necessarily the best examples of people, but they do some very courageous things. And without their action, God uses them, but they are participating in God's plan. And the absurdity of wickedness. This is, again, if you've read through the book of Esther before, you know the plot twist, and it's kind of funny, right? I mean, for Haman has got all this plan, and it's just God just turns it around. And Ahasuerus is a mighty king, right? Commands the whole world, but he can't get his wife to come before when he calls her, right? There's just and he's a wicked man. His advisors are wicked. Haman is wicked, but it's just so absurd. Where they think they have control, and they don't. God's sovereignty just overthrows every plan that they have. The Feast of Purim. So even to this day, Jewish people celebrate the end of this, the end of the book by the Feast of Purim, and they, as Charlie told me, that when they go through all the figures, they say the name of Haman. They got these big clackers, right? They're rooting against Haman. They know how it turns out, so they're really. But it's a celebration of God bringing him through this and preserving his people, and then finally God's promise of redemption. It really is. I mean, we can say, and most of commentators that I read said, if Haman does what he wants to do here, because when the order comes out, and things we're going to talk about later, when the order goes out, it goes to the entire kingdom, right? Remember that picture with all of that green? The order goes across the kingdom of Persia for all Jewish people to be killed. So without what God working here in these people, then God's redemption story would stop. The Israelites would be gone from the face of the earth. That's what we see here. This is all part of God preserving his people and preserving the redemption plan that he has for them. Thomas Watson, Puritan, great quote, "Providence is a Christian's diary, but not his Bible. Sometimes a bad cause prevails and gets ground, but it is not to be liked because it prevails. We must not think the better of what is sinful because it is successful. This is no rule for our actions to be directed by." Mordecai and Esther are not necessarily the best examples to follow. They're both kind of compromised in their morality and behavior. Mordecai encourages Esther to hide who she is. They both participate in a scheme of basically, to put it as appropriately as I can, as basically a sexual audition to be queen of Persia, right? They're both willing participants in this. And so, again, flawed people, but God is going to use them in his plan. It's not a narrative of good people doing good things for a good outcome, but a good God bringing about a good outcome through sinful people. Right? I can relate to that sentence. Right? That's things don't happen because I'm good and I'm doing good things. It's because I serve a good God who's bringing about a good outcome despite my sinfulness. It's kind of like what parenting is, right? That's kind of what, when your kids turn out good, it's like, look, I messed everything up, but somehow God brought them to the right place. So, as another preacher said, the ever-fascinating providence of a never-slumbering God explains the preservation of his always fragile people. Without God sustaining us and holding on to us, then we'd all fail and we'd all fall apart and fall away. Okay, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Some guy, I don't know who he is, I never met him, I saw him, I found this on an evangelical site, and it's called expositionalparenting.com, so if you're interested, go to that site, it's pretty good. But he has alliterated the entire book of Esther and alliterated each subsection under his outline. I thought it was so good. I'm going to try to follow it because it's all providentially is in every one, and I think it's a P word providentially and then something after it in every section. It's must have had a lot of time to do this. So we're going to get through chapter 1 today. So if someone would read, let's see, the first 9 verses for me. Go ahead, Charlie. Thank you.
Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in those days when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. And when these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus.
So this is how we know who this guy is. The first verse tells us specifically, reigned from India to Ethiopia, and his capital was in Susa, which if you have that on that picture, it's over on the right, up basically in modern day Iran, Iraq, somewhere in there. So this is, according to what we know, this is about the 3rd year of his reign. He's already went out, tried to conquer Greece, didn't do it, had to come back, and he's come back to try to raise some more money, raise more army to go back and try it again. But he's having a party, right? He's having, it's 9 verses where he gets to show his just magnificent wealth on display. It's overwhelming as you read it. You know, the silver and gold and marble and precious stones, all kinds of drink. I mean, they were having a big party. Actually, they think this probably lasted in total about 180 days. So this was a big party for a long time, just displaying the wealth of the king and showing what he was. And he, in several interesting things, and drinking according to this edict, there's no, do what you want, right? I mean, he's basically saying, hey, we want as big a party as we can get, drink as much as you want, you know, don't drink, whatever you want. We want a party. That's a celebration of the king and his wealth and his power, right? That he's trying to, this is a way to show his people how much money he's got, how wealthy he is, how powerful he is, right? This is a very human thing. He wants to show who he is, all that he has conquered, all of this wealth that he's brought back to his to the capital. He's wanting to display all of it and show this thing. That's what 1 through 9 is showing just the wealth and the opulence, the extravagance, and the just over the top display of saying who he is and the power that he has. And then we have three little verses, 10 to 12. So would somebody read verses 10 to 12? So here at some point, the women have their own party in another part of the palace, but at some point, the king remember, he's got all his generals, he's got all the elite of society, they're all at this party, and the king says, boy, it'd be nice to have Vashti. I want him to see how beautiful she is, this is more just his arrogant display of his power, the things that he controlled. And so now he just says, let's just go get Vashti, kind of parade her in front of everybody so everybody can see how beautiful she is. But ironically, so he gets 7 guys to go get her. 7 eunuchs who serve in his. He gets a group of 7. All 7 of you guys go over there, get the queen, and bring her back. Have her dressed up, put makeup on. We want her looking good. Bring her over. We want to look at her, see how pretty she is. Now, keep in mind, this is the man who controls the world from India all the way to Ethiopia. Has control of the whole world, practically. And he sends 7 men to go get his queen from across the street or down the hall, right, wherever she's at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. So again, the absurdity of wickedness, this just over-the-top display. He commands the whole world, but he can't tell his queen won't obey him. Right? So he becomes enraged, but why does he become enraged? Because she's made him look foolish. She's showing that you may be in control of the whole world, but you're not even in control of your wife. So he's made to look foolish and powerful, and he becomes enraged at this, right? Because he's a pompous man, he's an arrogant man, he's a narcissistic man who nobody tells him no. Ever. But she did. And so she says, no, I'm not going to do it. He becomes enraged, just apoplectic almost. And so then he brings in a bunch of wise men, and they're going to make a decision. So someone read 13 through the end of the chapter for us.
Then the king said to the wise men, bring me the times, for this was the king's procedure towards all who were versed in the law and judgment. The men next to him being Tarshina, Shithar, and Matha, Tarshish, Shish, Meres, Uris, Arsina, and I'm not going to try that one.
Close enough.
The 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face and said to the king, according to the law, what is to be done with the queen Vashti? Does he not perform the command of King Ahasuerus, delivered by the eunuchs? Then you can send in the presence of the king the officials not only against King has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against the officials of the peoples who are in the province of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to go to their husbands with same to all the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath and plenty. If it please the king, let a royal order go out and laws of the Persians and Medes, so that it may not be repealed that Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, for it is vast, all the women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. This advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces to every province in his own district, and to every people in his own language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people.
All right, I think we can give him a hand. He tackled some of those names pretty good. That was really good. So, yeah, I should have warned the people reading tonight that there's a couple sections where it's it got some pronunciation stuff in there, but he did a good job. So he gathers basically his 7 lieutenants, right? I mean, they're pretty protective of him. He's going to be by himself most of the time. There's people you just aren't allowed in to see the king, and so but he's got 7 guys, and it names all of them there. They're the princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face and set first in the kingdom. So this is his council, maybe his cabinet, right? These are the guys that are gonna, and he's asking them, well, what do we do? What can we do about this? Because Vashti just defied my command, and so what do we do? And according to the law, because he wants to know the law. The law of the Medes and Persians is a very determinative thing. Once it is written down, it's not to be changed ever, and so he wants to know what's his options, because she's not performed the command of King Ahasuerus. So then this guy Memucan says, well, she didn't just sin against you; she sinned against the whole kingdom, right? She's going to provide a bad example. It's almost as if he's saying she's going to show these women that they don't have to do what their husbands tell them. I mean, that's actually what he says. He's like they're worried about women no longer obeying their husbands, and so they got to do something about this. I'm not going to comment a whole lot on that, just because it seems like it might not be. I'm not sure which way to go with that, but. I'm not going to push the point any further than that. So, but for them, it was a big deal, right? He's the king of the entire world, and the queen just defied him and said no, and they can't let that stand. There's no way in their culture. There's no way this can happen, and part of the reason is there's a patriarchal society, right? Men are supposed to be in charge. They want the women to do what the men say, and so. Memucan says, this very day the noble women of Persia and Media will have heard of the queen's behavior and say the same to all the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath in plenty. Right? They're trying to keep things from getting out of hand. They want the men to stay in control, and he says, we're going to have a royal order. It can never be changed. Queen Vashti is going to never come before the presence of the king. She's basically banished from the royal household. Doesn't kill her. It doesn't record that he kills her, although he probably could have. Maybe that would have driven home the point some more, but he doesn't do that. He just deposes her and says she's never come before the king again. She's no longer king. And so it gets written into, and then so that's the first part of what they decree, is that she's no longer king, can't come before the king anymore. Then they're going to make a decree that's going to be proclaimed from India to Ethiopia, right? Remember how big this kingdom is. All women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. That's the decree, right? So that's going down to all 127 provinces because they want to keep this the way that the structure is, this societal structure. This advice and pleased the king and princes, and the king did. And so he sends letters to everywhere, to every people in their own language, right? This wasn't just for Persian people. It was for anybody under his control. They translated into all the language that every man would be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. So, again, why did she refuse? We don't know. It doesn't tell us. Maybe she had a headache. Maybe she had a bad day. I don't know. Maybe he was a jerk and she didn't want to have anything more to do with it. I put whatever reason you think in there, but the fact is she said no. A simple thing in the scheme of things. Maybe she didn't want to be paraded around, I mean, whatever reason you put in there, she just said no. So one woman just says no to her husband. I'm not going to come just walk through your party just because you told me to. And so she gets deposed. And it seems like such a small thing. But without this event, then the rest of the book doesn't happen. Right? I think that's what we want to pull from this, that a position providentially vacated. Why did she do that? It was part of God's plan. She said no and got deposed out of the kingdom because it was part of God's providential plan to bring about and rescue his people. And we're going to see these little things over and over again in this book that is God using people's decisions in a way that brings about his kingdom. Can you pass out that other one for me now? So this is an outline of Esther. Now, I don't have the colors on that one because it didn't print, but I think you could still read it. But this is the whole outline of the book, right? Everything that happens, it's kind of broken up, so I thought you could use it and kind of follow along and study it as we're going ahead. All right, I feel like I put out a lot of information in there. Do we have any questions, any comments on what we've presented tonight? All right, well, as soon as he gets those passed out, we'll pray and we'll be dismissed. And kids will have about 10 minutes. So, but pastor usually gets them out a little bit early. So, but we got. Thank you, sir. I'm gonna, even if I have to hurry through everything, we're going to try to get to the end of the book because I'm going to let somebody else do N4C next spring, so the adult Bible study part. So, all right. If you don't have any questions, it's the crux of the story starts next week. This is kind of just it's just an introduction, but we really get into it. Read Esther this week. Again, it'll only take you 30 minutes. If that, maybe quicker if you read fast, or maybe just a little bit longer, but not much. It's a really interesting story. So, all right, let's have a word of prayer. We'll be dismissed. Father, we thank you for your providence in all of life. Father, so many things happen that we don't understand, that you weave into your sovereign plan. Father, you take wretched sinners, Father, those who ignore your word completely, but Father, you use their actions to bring about your glory and your plan in all of creation. And this is, as we begin to study this example of this specific moment in history where your providence and your grace for your people is demonstrated, I pray that you'll help us to see that our lives are no different, that moments of grace and moments of providence in our lives are happening all the time. and that we look forward to understanding your sovereign plan in our lives, Father, and to see how history will unfold even as we're awaiting Christ's return and all that that will encompass. And so we want to give you glory, and we know that we're safe in your hands, we're kept in your hands. Nothing is going to surprise you, and so we can trust your word and trust your promises. Pray it will be with every person here this week, Father. Give them grace, protection as they work, as they do the things that are necessary for life. And we look forward to even coming back together again next week to worship you, to lift high the name of Christ. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.